Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss the important issues appearing in the Hindu newspaper dated 14 July 2018. Let us begin. The first news appears on page number 1 and it also appears as a continuation on page number 10. The news reads, DNA profiles won't be kept permanently and it will be erased once the case ends, as per the officials. This news on DNA profile bill has already been covered under a previous DNS dated 5th July 2018. So in this DNS, let us understand the concerns with respect to this DNA profiling bill as well as how the government aims to address those concerns as well as challenges. Now, the Union Cabinet has approved the DNA Technology Use and Application Regulation Bill 2018, commonly known as the DNA Profiling Bill, and this was drafted by the Department of Biotechnology. Now, this bill allows for law enforcement agencies to collect DNA samples, create DNA profiles, and to create special data banks for forensic and criminal investigations. So, primarily, this bill aims to establish a DNA profiling board as well as a DNA data bank. And this DNA data bank shall be stored at central as well as regional level. So let us go through the concerns with respect to this DNA Technology Use and Application Regulation Bill. The first and the foremost concern with respect to storing of such DNA data is that of security. So in this, the primary security concerns were that how the data will be stored, whether storage of such data will be secure, and who will regulate and address security concerns in respect of any data breach. Another important aspect with respect to storage of DNA data is that of a privacy concern. And the issue is, can storage of such data lead to privacy issues? As we all know that right to privacy is now a part of our fundamental right to life and personal liberty. So all these concerns becomes important to understand and analyze the features of this DNA profiling bill. So with respect to this authorization issue, the bill aims to establish the DNA profiling board. So let us understand certain basic point about DNA profiling board. Now this DNA profiling board shall be a 11-member body which will grant accreditation to DNA labs. So effectively, by grading such DNA labs, this DNA profiling board also aims to regulate such labs. And in this respect, it also aims to regulate even the private DNA labs in India. So these are some of the important points with respect to the DNA profiling board, as it becomes the regulating authority or a regulating board which will also grant accreditation to such DNA labs in India. So on the issue of concerns, the government has set certain points with respect to how it aims to address such concerns, primarily with respect to data storage, security as well as privacy. So we know that these DNA profiles shall be stored in a data bank for the purpose of criminal investigation as well as finding missing persons or in cases of mass disaster. In such a case, the government has said that it does not aim to store these DNA data permanently and the DNA bank will not be a permanent set. And it's important to know that the government aims to store these DNA profiles under various index such as crime scene index, suspects index and offenders index. Thus, it will become easy to catalog as well as identify such DNA profiles. It further says that the DNA details shall be removed as per the judicial orders, that is, order given by court of law. And the government further said that such DNA will remain in the DNA bank till a criminal case is solved. And once a criminal case has been solved, the DNA details shall be removed from the bank. In this respect, the government said that the working details of such a DNA bank as well as removal of DNA profile shall be specified in the rules framed by the government. So all these details shall be specified in the rules framed by the government. And these rules will be notified once Parliament approves the said DNA bill. So in this, the government aims to address concerns with respect to security, data storage as well as privacy, and the government has said that it does not aim to store the DNA permanently and these DNA bank will not be a permanent set. These DNA details shall be removed as per judicial orders, that is orders by the court, as well as once a criminal case has been solved, the given DNA details shall be removed from the DNA bank. And for the purpose of cataloging, the DNA shall be stored in different index such as crime scene index, suspect index as well as offenders index. So these are the steps how the government aims to address such security concerns with respect to DNA storage. So this topic of DNA profile won't be kept permanently becomes very important with respect to your UPSC examination. As far as your syllabus is concerned, it pertains to GS paper 2, specifically under statutory, regulatory and various quasi-judicial body. As DNA Profiling Board becomes one of the regulating body which shall give grading or accreditation to the laboratories which stores DNA profile in India. So after going through the discussion, I am sure you will be able to solve this particular question with respect to DNA technology use and application bill. It says, discuss the salient features of the bill, what are the various challenges with respect to the bill, and how the government aims to address such challenges. As questions on various bills have been asked by UPSC in the previous examinations. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 1 and also appears as a continuation on page number 10. The news reads, "We are not a surveillance state, Supreme Court of India." Now in this news, the Supreme Court in an ongoing case has categorically said that we are not a surveillance state. Let us find out why the Supreme Court has said that. Now in this news, the central government has proposed to set up a social media communication hub, and this social media communication hub aims to collect, analyze and track all social media chatterings on various platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, etc. Where this social media hub will collect information and also analyze all the messages. So in this regard, a PIL has been filed against this particular proposal of the government, where it has been alleged that such instances can amount to mass surveillance. And in this ongoing case, the Supreme Court has taken a strong note against the decision of the central government to create a social media communication hub, and has also observed that such an act by the government will amount to creating a surveillance state. And this is what the news actually reads. Now this creation of social media hub can have various concerns with respect to infringement of privacy, data mining, e-surveillance, as well as gauging public opinion. So these concerns with respect to mass surveillance becomes extremely important and a very sensitive issue. Now to create this social media communication hub, the Government of India through its PSU, Broadcasting Engineering Consultants India Limited, has invited bids to choose an agency to create up the said hub. So in this respect, this matter becomes crucially important as it is being currently heard by the Supreme Court. Now earlier, there was a Universal Periodic Review of India as per the Human Rights Council, where as per the report on 3rd Universal Periodic Review of India, it stated that the Government of India has decided to set up a centralized monitoring system to automate the process of lawful interception and monitoring of telecommunications. So this report of Human Rights Council has suggested that the Government of India aims to set up a centralized monitoring system to automate the process of lawful interception and monitoring of telecommunication. So this UPR, that is Universal Periodic Review, is a process of Human Rights Council which involves a review of human rights record of 193 member states once every 4 years. So this becomes an important information. The review is conducted by the working group which consists of 47 members of the Human Rights Council. So this topic on creation of social media communication hub becomes extremely crucial, as questions also have been asked by UPSC in the GS paper 3 section. This question was asked in the year 2016, which read, use of internet and social media by non-state actors for subversive activities is a major security concern. How have these been misused in the recent past? Suggest effective guidelines to curb the above threat. And a similar question was asked in the year 2017, which read, discuss the potential threats of cyber attack and security framework to prevent it. So you see, the issue of social media of late had gathered steam, and also the issue of mass surveillance becomes extremely important in this very context. As far as your syllabus is concerned, it forms a part of GS paper 3, specifically under challenges to internal security through communication networks, role of media and social networking sites and internal security challenges. Thus, this news on mass surveillance and creation of social media communication hub by the central government becomes extremely important. Since the ongoing case is in transition, let's wait and find out what the Supreme Court finally has to say on the creation of social media communication hub. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 7. The news reads, survey launched to rank states on rural cleanliness. Now this news pertains to Swachh Survekshan Grameen 2018, which is a nationwide rural India survey. And in this, 6,980 villages across 698 districts shall be surveyed. This topic gets covered under GS paper 2, specifically under social justice, under issues relating to development and management of social sectors such as health. as well as human resources. So in this, let's find out about this particular Pan-India Rural Survey. It says the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation has launched this rural survey known as Swachh Survekshan Grameen 2018. So this rural survey is known as Swachh Survekshan Grameen 2018 and launched by Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation. So this becomes a key information. It further says that this Swachh Survekshan Grameen 2018 is a nationwide survey of rural India to rank the cleanest as well as dirtiest states and districts on the basis of qualitative as well as quantitative evaluation. So this aims to rank cleanest as well as dirtiest states and districts. And this ranking of cleanliness shall be on qualitative as well as quantitative measures. Now in this, an independent survey agency will conduct a survey of rural India in all districts from 1st to 31st August 2018. So this particular rural survey will start very soon. It further says that the results will be announced in the form of ranking of all districts and states, as we have already seen here. So this survey has been launched by Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, and this is a pan-India survey of each states as well as districts. And the states and districts shall be ranked as per their cleanliness. In this regard, let us also understand about the objective of the survey. As we have already seen, it will give ranking to state as well as districts. It says to undertake ranking of states and districts on the basis of their performance attained on key quantitative and qualitative parameters. So ranking becomes one of the key objectives of this rural survey. Next, community engagement in cleanliness measures. Now this point becomes extremely important, as it says in the process of community engagement through a countrywide communication campaign, rural communities will be engaged in the improvement of sanitation and cleanliness of the surrounding areas. Another objective of this survey is to engage the community and its people in improving the sanitation as well as cleanliness of the surrounding areas. Thus, ranking as well as community engagement becomes one of the key objectives of Swachh Survekshan Grameen. Further, it talks about the modalities of this particular survey. So it says, as part of this Survekshan Grameen, 6,980 villages in 698 districts across India will be covered. Further, total 34,000 public places, namely schools, anganwadis, public health centers, haat, bazaars, religious places in these villages will be visited for survey. So this will be a comprehensive survey covering every aspects of social life. It further says that citizens' feedback will be collected from over 50 lakh citizens on Swachh Bharat mission related issues through direct interaction as well as online feedback. So this survey also aims to engage public and get a response in terms of direct feedback as well as online feedback. And in the process, it will also make the citizens aware about this particular rural survey. And this will further help in better community engagement. As far as quantitative measures are concerned, it says that direct observation of sanitation in public places shall be granted a 30% weightage. Citizens' feedback on sanitation parameters shall be given a 35% weightage. And service level progress on sanitation progress in the country as per Swachh Bharat Mission Grameen MIS, that is Management Information System, shall be granted 35%. So we see that a direct observation is given 30%, citizens' feedback is given 35%, and service level progress through MIS is given 35%. So this is the complete weighted or quantification of this particular rural survey. So this news on Swachh Survekshan Grameen becomes very important from our exam point of view, and in this we must remember the ministry which has launched it, that is Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news also appears on page number 7. The news reads, NGT, that is National Green Tribunal, to hear pleas via video conference. And this is because bid to tackle staff shortage at benches in Kolkata, Chennai, Pune and Bhopal. So in this news, the National Green Tribunal will now hear cases through video conferencing to tackle the issue of vacancy at its regional benches, mainly at Kolkata, Chennai, Pune and Bhopal. Now in this regard, you must know that the principal bench of this NGT, that is National Green Tribunal, is in New Delhi. It further says that the NGT has been functioning with less than 1/3 of its sanctioned strength of 20 judicial and expert members, as there have been no recent appointments to these regional benches. So issue here is working with less judicial strength. So because of this issue of vacancy at these regional benches, the NGT has finally decided that it will hear cases via video conferencing. Now the reasons for video conferencing are transfer of cases to principal bench at Delhi from regional benches due to lack of judges and experts. And because of this lack of judges and experts, the NGT at Delhi has decided to go for video conferencing to solve the pending matter. It further says that the video conferencing measure will further improve the disposal rate of pending cases, as people have to suffer unnecessary burden since they have to travel to Delhi from far off places, and this results in loss of their time, energy as well as resource. So because of all these reasons, the NGT at Delhi has decided that it will solve the pending cases of these regional benches via video conferencing. So in this respect, let us also understand certain basic facts about NGT, that is National Green Tribunal. Now the NGT has been established under the National Green Tribunal Act 2010. This becomes a very important piece of information. It further says that it aims at effective and expeditious disposal of cases relating to environmental protection and conservation of forest and other natural resources, including enforcement of any legal right relating to environment and giving relief and compensation for damages to persons and property. So it effectively says that it aims at enforcement of legal rights of people, it aims to safeguard environmental protection and its conservation, as well as to give relief and compensation for damages to persons as well as property. So this NGT is a specialized body equipped with necessary expertise to handle environmental disputes involving multidisciplinary issues. So this is all the facts about National Green Tribunal. Further it says that the tribunal shall consist of a full-time chairperson, not less than 10 but subject to a maximum of 20 judicial members, and not less than 10 but subject to a maximum of 20 full-time expert members. So we see both judicial members as well as expert members forms a part of National Green Tribunal. And it further says that the chairperson can invite anyone or more person having specialized knowledge and experience in a particular case. So the chairperson has liberty to invite any person with respect to a case who has certain expertise knowledge to that particular domain. So all this fact becomes important about the NGT. You must remember that apart from a full-time chairperson, it has judicial members as well as expert members. This topic forms a part of your GS paper 2, specifically under statutory, regulatory and various quasi-judicial bodies, and also gets covered under GS paper 3, specifically under environment section. Now question in 2012 has already been asked by UPSC in the prelims examination. Let's go through the question. The question asked was, the National Green Tribunal Act 2010 was enacted in consonance with which of the following provisions of the Constitution of India? The options were right to healthy environment construed as a part of right to life under Article 21, provision of grants for issuing the level of administration in scheduled areas for the welfare of scheduled tribes under Article 275 Clause 1, and powers and functions of Gram Sabha as mentioned under Article 243 Clause A. Now we know that NGT was established for the purpose of regulating the environment, which also impacts our day-to-day life. Hence, it can be said that right to healthy environment construed as part of right to life under Article 21 is the correct answer, and these two do not correspond to the purpose and function of National Green Tribunal Act 2010. So the correct answer here is A only. So we see this topic of National Green Tribunal becomes very important with respect to our UPSC examination. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 8 in the editorial section. The news reads, conferring eminence, raising the quality of higher education across the board should be a priority. Now this news on higher education comes under GS paper 2, specifically under issues relating to development and management of education. So let's find out what this particular editorial in the backdrop of granting institution of eminent status to 6 institutions, 3 from public and 3 from private sector, has to say. The editorial suggests that the government must take appropriate measures to raise the quality of higher education across the board, including central and state universities. So this is talking about inclusive growth of all higher education and not just island of eminence. And this inclusive growth includes central university, state universities, as well as deemed universities. So this editorial effectively talks about inclusive growth. In this it says that the government should not focus on few elite colleges or universities of India. Thus, the editorial mentions that the working group of 12th plan had identified three areas, basically expansion of institutions, inclusion, as well as excellence as the three pillars of growth for higher institutions. It says that going on the line of 12th plan of planning commission, the government in the budget of 2016 had encouraged a proposal to make 10 institutions, each in public as well as private sectors, to be made globally competitive. So the idea earlier was to make the 10 public as well as private institutions globally competitive based on certain parameters. However, now, as we know, the government has granted the institution of eminent status to only 6 institutes, 3 from public sectors and 3 from private sectors. It then says the challenge of excellence is to develop liberal institutions founded on the principles of academic rigor, high scholarship, and equitable access for all classes of students. So, inclusiveness is very important for higher education. So, the idea of inclusiveness for all students becomes one of the important parameters of competitive growth. The editorial then says, but the decision of the government to grant Institute of Eminent status to 6 institutes goes against the principle of inclusiveness and equality. It further says, while choosing institutes for IOE status, the empowered committee found that the state universities had a low output because some of them had several faculty members recruited on contractual basis with no incentive to do research. So we see that recruitment process becomes one of the impediments for various institutes of higher learning, as this recruitment process must be regularized. So the editorial suggests certain steps to make institutions more inclusive. These steps are end of ad hoc appointments and regularizing appointment process for researchers and professors. It further says educational institutions must be isolated from daily politics and ideological biases. Vice chancellors must be appointed on merit and not on political affiliations or considerations. Further, academic freedom to restructure courses. Then it says that regularization of financial grants for infrastructure and to encourage innovation and research. So regularizing of financial grant again becomes a crucial aspect with respect to growth of higher education. Further says raising expenditure by the government on research and development as a part of their budget. Further, to raise the quality of academic standards across institutions of higher learning, including central, state, as well as deemed universities. So, these are the steps as suggested by the editorial to make our institutions for higher education more inclusive as well as competitive. So, we know that granting of Institute of Eminent status by the government has raised certain controversy with respect to choice of colleges. So in this backdrop, this editorial becomes very important. It talks about inclusive growth of all the universities and it also suggests measures how to attain such inclusiveness. As mentioned earlier, this topic forms a part of GS paper 2 and education becomes an important aspect of our day-to-day life. Hence, this topic becomes very important. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 13. The news reads, US steel tariff may impact India indirectly. Minister, surplus produce may come to India, but it will hit local makers. Now this topic of steel tariff covers under GS paper 3, specifically under Indian economy and related issues. So in this particular news, the Union Steel Minister has said that 25% tariff imposed by the United States on steel import can indirectly affect the domestic sector. So the impact of US raising steel import will have an indirect impact. It says the impact would be indirect because India's export of steel to United States are not very significant. Hence the impact may not be very drastic. The impact, however, may come through an indirect route. Indirect impact. Now it says because of increase of tariff by United States on steel, countries which are exporting to the US will be forced to look at other major steel consuming markets. And India, we know, is a major steel consuming market. So these countries look at India to sell their surplus produce. This surplus steel in the market will distort our domestic market due to the case of dumping. So the first, it says, because of increase of tariffs by the United States, the other countries who are exporting steel to the US will search for other options like India, and this will further distort our domestic market. The second indirect impact, it talks about inflation and equity market. Let's find out how. It says that within the US domestic economy, both imports of steel and domestic production of steel will become costly due to increased tariff by United States. This rise in cost will be passed on to the consumer, which will further lead to higher consumer prices or rise in inflation. So the increase of tariff by the United States on steel will effectively lead to rise in inflation. Now, to contain this rise in inflation, the Federal Reserve may increase interest rates. It says this could force Federal Reserve to raise its interest rate frequently to prevent US economy from higher inflation. So this increase of interest rate by Federal Reserve would affect both equity and debt markets of developing economies like India, as investors look to chase highest returns in the US economy. So because of this high interest rate, because of Fed Reserve, money which is there in India may start to flow out to such places of higher returns. So this is the indirect impact which is talks about with respect to rising tariffs by United States on steel. As discussed, this topic of rising tariff comes under the economy section. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 11. The news reads, in tightrope walk, India schedules talks with Iran and United States. It says Washington to reimpose curbs on Tehran from 6th August wants all countries to stop their oil imports. Iran clarifies that it understands India's difficulties. So in this news, the United States had recently withdrawn from the Iranian nuclear deal and would be reimposing the first set of secondary sanctions on Iran in August 2018. And in addition, US intends for all countries to curb their import of Iranian oil to almost nil, that is zero. This US pressure to curb complete import of Iranian oil has put India in a catch-22 situation. Let's find out how. Now there are two things. First, if India agrees to US demand to curb import of oil from Iran, then certain things will follow. Let's see what are those things. If India agrees to the US demand to curb import of oil from Iran. In this situation, India may face a deprivation of all forms of privileges Iran has offered to India so far with respect to oil imports if it chooses to replace Iranian oil from other sources. So in this, India may lose Iranian privileges. However, in this respect, Iran has expressed that it understands India's difficulties with respect to US sanction. It then says, India may by agreeing for oil cuts can seek a waiver from US sanctions for its investment in the Chabahar port. Thus, India may get a waiver from US sanction, which it has imposed on India due to its investment in the Chabahar port. It further says, India may lose its foreign policy stance of strategic autonomy by crumbling under the US pressure. Further, India's oil import bill would rise, which will negatively impact India's current account deficit. So, current account deficit of India may rise further. It may improve India's relationship with the Trump administration. So, these are some of the things which may happen if India agrees to go by the US demand. Further, let's find out what happens if India does not agree to the US demand to curb import of oil from Iran. It says it would support India's already stated stance that it recognizes only UN-led sanctions and not country-specific sanctions, thereby maintaining strategic autonomy. Further, it says Indian companies will come under US sanctions. So these are the impacts on both sides. That is, if India agrees to US demand, whereas if India also does not agree to the US demand. Now this news is currently in transition. India will be conducting meetings with both Iran and US in the coming weeks. So let us wait and find out how this issue moves forward. As far as your syllabus is concerned, this topic gets covered under GS paper 2 under international relations and specifically under Effect of policies and politics of development developing countries on India's interest. So this news currently is in transition, so let's wait and watch for the upcoming events. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for daily DNS updates. With this, let's move on to the question for the day.